came across this article about 36 questions. And the whole premise of this 36 questions was that it made people closer. And it's a study done by two folks that are married, Arthur Aaron and Elaine Aaron, did this study in the mid-90s about interpersonal closeness. And they took people from different walks in life and said, hey, if these two people sit down together and ask each other and answer these 36 questions, they will become closer. And they've done this with their students in the college classroom. They did this with people from different ethnic backgrounds to see if they could become closer. They did this with police officers and people in the community to try and break down barriers and get people to be closer. So I wanted to see, what is this all about? From conversations to the natural world to complete silence, so many of us focus on what's next rather than what is happening now. I'm Listening is a podcast that dissects the importance of listening.
I'm Drew Richmond.
And I'm Brand Christofferson.
And this is I'm Listening, a podcast simply about the skill of listening. Okay, so you've got these 36 questions. You came across this article. We have a podcast that's called I'm Listening. How does this study with these 36 questions, how does that tie into listening? What drew you to it?
This started with an article I remember seeing years ago, and it was titled, "To Fall in Love with Anyone, Do This." And it was introducing the 36 questions as a way to fall in love, as a way to fall in love. And I was like, can you really do that? You can't really do that, can you?
So like love in a laboratory?
Love in a laboratory? No, just love anywhere.
That was a Aerosmith song. Love in an elevator. Never mind. Go on. I'm sorry.
So anyway, this was popularized by this. I don't know the hell I'm going anymore. I'm going to do whatever I can to get you off track.
That's my goal.
So I thought it'd be fun to talk about these because asking questions is all about listening. We ask questions, we hear a response, and that is all about listening. So I'm like, okay, if there's a way to listen better and it's going to help me become closer to somebody, let's talk about that.
But these two professors, when they were putting this together in the mid-90s, this was not to create love, right? This was, you used the term interpersonal closeness, yes. But it wasn't about love. Where did love come into the play here?
Love came into play when this study was popularized by a New York Times article in 2015, saying, hey, if you want to fall in love, use these 36 questions. So imagine, I pictured in my head like sitting down on a first date and asking these 36 questions and watching the sparks fly, right?
So, hi, my name is Brant. I have 36 questions for you. This will only take 6 hours.
Take 6 hours.
Kidding aside, this is for real. Like this experiment has been conducted thousands of times. You know, this 2015 New York Times article turns this into something. Even the Today Show picked it up and had things on TV, all kinds of different stuff. It kind of took fire a little bit with it, but it was all based around love, which was actually not the intent of these questions. But this gets into what we're going to talk about with this podcast a little bit in terms of the interpretation of these 36 questions. It's to create this thing that they classified as interpersonal closeness. But today, 30 years later, we're translating it into love. Literally the definition, intense feeling of deep affection for somebody. We want to talk about that a little bit today because it's this shift in people looking for love, but looking for love in different ways than this, the intent of this study. So here we are. We've got this 36 questions. And again, it's not 3 questions. This isn't just like 5 to 10 minutes. This is 36 questions. This takes some time. This takes commitment. But it talks about this connection and connecting with other people through a series of questions. I looked through it. I actually did ask some of these questions with my spouse, and they work. it's kind of intense, right? Some of them are easier. Some of them are way deep. There's like an actual like emotional reaction to some of these questions. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it is pretty fascinating. And they're sequenced in a way too, where they're in sets of 3. So the first 12 are a little less risky. Into set 2 and then into set 3, the more intense they begin to go. My wife and I also sat down to go through these questions, and you'll notice pretty quickly they are written for 2 strangers that don't know each other. For Karen and I to sit down together and ask some of these questions, we're like, well, we already know the answer to that. But a lot of them were like, oh, we've never really just talked about this before. So it was kind of cool to explore it, not as strangers, but as 2 people who've been together a really long time.
What are some of the questions? What did you guys identify as some of the easier ones?
The easier ones were like, name 3 things you and your partner appear to have in common. Those are the easier ones. Sure. And I'm just looking in the first set here. For what in your life do you feel most grateful? So that, question on gratitude is pretty easy. But once it started getting into
that makes sense.
The questions on death or your future or things like that, it started to get a little tricky. So here's the first question in set 2. If a crystal ball could tell you the truth about yourself, your life, the future, or anything else, what would you want to know? What would you want to know, Drew?
I want to know how I'm going to answer that question. Because seriously, like you have to sit down, like that's homework. But this is not designed to like, hey, take these questions home and then think about, write out all your answers and then present them the next day. This is, you ask this question and you're looking for this kind of immediate response to this.
There's a vulnerability to this because, you're not prepared or planning to answer it.
Right. So, okay, so let's look at this question real quick. Tell you the truth about yourself, your life, your future. So basically you look into a crystal ball and what do you want to know? My future? I mean, that's the idea, right? So I don't know. How long am I going to live? God, I can't even answer the question right now that you asked me because it opens me up a little bit, right? And it's like all of a sudden there's this vulnerability. It's like, well, how long am I going to live? How do my children live their lives? Are my parents still? How long are my parents around for? Am I still in this home? Do I still have the same job? Like, I don't know, man. And that's one of the questions. So that's one of the ones that, and there are ones that get deeper, but that is one that even as you ask me that, and I have to react to it, it's like, whoa, let me think about that for a second.
And you get into those side conversations then of, oh my gosh, yeah, do I think about this? I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Let's say this information about your future. Are you going to act differently now knowing that? Or are you going, you know what I mean? And change the future or not? I just don't want to know.
Another one of the questions, and it's kind of that similar thing. It's, would you like to be famous and in what way? My wife and I both answered the question very quickly. No. We don't want to be famous. We don't want to have that life because right now where we are, everything's working great. We don't need to have the fortune would be great, but we don't need to have the fame and that constant pressure and all those things that surround that. So, some of these were a little bit easier to answer. It was nice to be on the same page. What would constitute a perfect day for you? Okay, we were pretty close to that. There's probably a beach, there's probably some sunshine, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have a secret hunch about how you will die?
Oof. Is
question number 7. That's the 7th question.
Yeah.
And there's both of us had this because of different things that have affected our lives. Both of us had this actual physical like step back to that question and go, ugh, I don't like that one.
I don't like it, but I like how they phrased it. Do you have a secret hunch about how you will die? That's a yes or no question, right?
Yeah.
Yes or no.
Point.
But it also allows you to go into deeper if you want to. And if, I don't know, you answer yes, okay, I kind of want to know more about why you're thinking you have a hunch about how you might die. You get into this vulnerable area where you normally don't go because it can be uncomfortable. But it forces you to go to those uncomfortable spots because it's when you go to those uncomfortable spots that we start to open up. And when we're opening up with each other, we're starting to make those connections, right? We're starting to go, oh, this makes this person uncomfortable, or this doesn't make that person uncomfortable. Why is that?
And is that where they start to connect the dots towards love? Like, is that where this word of love starts to come into play? Because you start to open yourself up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So, man, I don't know. It's interesting how they tie together love to that. I digress a little bit, but professors who put these together, this couple, these are very smart people. They picking apart that question a little bit more. Do you have a secret hunch about how you will die? They could have very simply asked, do you think you know how you will die? But the fact that it's secret hunch, it almost leads to you of like, do you kind of have this way that you think this is going to go out that you haven't told anybody? It's a secret.
Yeah, it's asking to die.
Like it's implying that you've thought about this before because it's a secret. Like, a really interesting way that they phrase that out. But it completely changes how the question is asked and how the question is received.
It definitely does. The other one that was interesting is this is in the last set, is what, if anything, is too serious to be joked about?
Yeah. Whoa. That makes me uncomfortable just hearing you say it. Because
I'm on both camps. Either everything is too serious to be joked about, or nothing is too serious to be joked about. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that one?
This question it feels like it's a trap.
It is a trap. Because no matter what I answer, I'm gonna no matter what you answer, I'm gonna come back with the alternate, right?
Yeah, and so if it's too serious, if it's a very serious topic, why would you ever put it in the context to be joked about, right? So if it's too serious to be joked about, how did you put those two things together? I mean, that is throwing yourself out there big time. It's a trap of a question.
It is, but that's what comedians do, though. That's what good comedy is they're able to edge into those territories of things you're not supposed to talk about, or are not comfortable, or might feel too serious. And they find a way to get in there to bring light to it,
right?
To bring it to life. I'm not saying we should all go make inappropriate jokes. I'm saying that it is a way to explore things that maybe make us uncomfortable.
Interesting. The question that precedes that one is, tell your partner something that you like about them already. So that's where they take you through this dance of, before you even get to the what's too serious to be joked about, you're just telling them something that you like about them. It's this interesting contrast as they go through these questions. But you can see, even with this small sample, we just talked about 5 or 6 of these questions. There's 36 of them. You can start to see how, boy, you're sitting down with somebody for a while and you're getting into some pretty deep stuff.
Yeah. You can't rush these, right? You're saying there are 36 questions. They take a while. I think that's the point, is it takes a while. It takes time to be able to sit and think about the questions, but it also takes time to listen to what the other person's saying and take that in. And it's that exchange, it's that the time spent with someone else, which is great.
And taking that time to do that with a stranger, with a potential partner, with your spouse of 15 plus years, whatever that is, I can't help but to think about doing this 30 years ago and doing this today, and internet dating, and how that has had an effect. Now, I missed that. Right. I've been with my wife for just about 20 years. We didn't go down that route. So I don't know what it's like, but what I do know is that it is likely the most trusted way and the most popular way, and is probably not going away in terms of technology and ability to connect people, but to expedite that process. So how do you intertwine these 36 questions, which we've just talked about, creates this vulnerability? It breaks down these barriers. It takes time and a commitment to go through this. And what's the juxtaposition of that with swiping left, swiping up, swiping right, whatever it is, or clicking a button to say, yeah, I do kind of like you, based on some questions and based on some algorithm in the background that's putting us all together? Do you think that the intersection is an article in 2015 about love?
I think they're both ways designed to help us find a connection with someone else. So if I'm filling out a survey on a dating app, it is using their algorithms to narrow down where my interests might intersect with someone else's interest. That is a lot less risky in regards to being vulnerable. I can do that by myself and not have to feel vulnerable. The questions, on the other hand, you've got to sit down and talk with somebody. You've got to open yourself up in front of somebody, and that is a lot more vulnerable. So there's the dichotomy there. I think that like, even if I take these 36 questions and I put them in a chat room or we're texting back and forth, I don't think it's the same as being able to sit down with somebody and interact and talk. I think there's a level of closeness that maybe we used to see more often before there were internet dating apps, where you'd have to sit down and talk with somebody. The paradox to me is that those interactions of being face-to-face, I feel like used to happen a lot more than they do today. Today, though, we are much more open and articulate about talking about emotions, where 30 years ago, we don't talk about emotions, right? But we're more open to connecting with people more vulnerably 30 years ago, but we're less likely to talk about emotions.
Let me recap what you just said, because I think you just nailed it. So you've got this ability through technology to expedite the process of finding a partner, finding somebody that you want to be with. This 36 questions is the opposite of that, where it might be intertwined a little bit, but the intent behind it is that you sit down, spend time, create that in-person vulnerability.
Yeah.
And at the exact same time, generally speaking, 30 years ago, you did not talk about your emotions. You did not talk about how you were feeling. You kept those things inside until they dispersed or built up or whatever it was. Today, starting in elementary school, you are taught to talk about your emotions and to get those feelings out. There's more money ever before invested in mental health and behavioral health and all those things. So it's this weird, it's almost like this thing was set up 30 years ago to sit down when you generally sat down more, when you generally interacted with human beings face to face more. It was designed to do that in a setting where you're doing it face to face. But you weren't supposed to talk about your emotions. And now we've created a world where you do it passively through technology, but we are now almost compensating for that by actually saying, well, you do actually have to get your emotions a lot more, get those emotions out more, because it's not good for you to keep them inside. That's a fascinating take.
Yeah. What's better? Or is do I have to choose?
Yeah.
Or,
what's right? Yeah.
What's right?
And it's not. Yeah, it isn't. It's not about what's right, but it's a great question, right? But I don't think it's about that. I think when you brought this subject up to me, these 36 questions, I'd never heard of them before in my life.
Yeah.
But as I got into it, and as I've looked into them more and tried to understand it a little bit more, I would argue that they are more relevant today and more powerful today than what they were 30 years ago. Because I do believe that there are more barriers. I do believe that people struggle listening to each other more. I do believe that people utilize technology as a wall to kind of say whatever they want to say and then just turn it off and walk away from it. So that act of looking at partner, friend, whatever it is, spouse, in the eye and asking them some of these questions really does create this vulnerability. It really, as I said before, it creates this physical response. In today's world, even compared to 30 years ago, time for your partner, for your friend, whatever it is fading away. So I think that it's interesting to put that in there, but I think I would argue that it's more powerful today than it was 30 years ago.
More powerful because we have more things competing for our attention.
Yeah. I mean, what's the average hour an average person spends on their phone? That's not asking questions and creating dialogue with your partner in this sense. Texting back and forth, whatever, I'm talking about in the context of this 36 questions ultimately designed to create interpersonal closeness. I believe there's more obstacles to that today than ever before.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on that. So today we've got more things competing for our attention. It feels a lot safer to go look at my phone than it does to talk to somebody next to me, right? We talked about that when we were talking about being in the airport. it is easier to just kind of close down into our own little bubble and look at my phone, play a game on my phone, read the news, read a book, what have you. I'm opening myself up to vulnerability. I'm opening myself up to what? To be shot down when I've talked to somebody, right?
Shot down, but also get an answer that you might not only get an answer that you might not be ready to listen to or be ready to hear, or that catches you off guard, but also forces you to say something that you maybe weren't ready to just flat out talk about. One of these questions in the middle segment, in the middle 12 of these, right in the middle of it, number 6 is, what's your most terrible memory? You're sitting down and you're talking to somebody going through these questions. Man, like that, are you ready to break down those barriers and talk about that right then and there? This isn't something that, hey, next Friday at 3:00, we're going to get together and then you can answer that question. We're talking right now. You have to just talk about this. And the person sitting across from you is listening to this. Mm-hmm. So there's that vulnerability of what you're about to say and what you feel you want to say. And you could make stuff up. Like, you don't have to actually do it. It could be just be something else because you're not ready to talk about your most terrible memory. But if you do that, are both sides of that table ready to talk and ready to listen to it? That is an intense level of vulnerability. Yeah. There is a tremendous risk involved with that. And I don't care if you've been together for 50 years or if you've been together for 50 minutes. There is tremendous risk with that because you may never have talked about this. And now it's presenting itself that you're going to have to talk about this for the first time.
So you could be setting yourself up for disappointment or rejection, or you could be deepening compassion or empathy or connection with somebody.
Exactly. And that's the risk, right?
Yeah.
And I think if I could put myself in the brains of the professors putting this together 30 years ago or 50 years ago, or however long it took them to actually create these 36, I don't think they did it overnight. There's got to be some level of vulnerability with this, with that risk. But if the risk is worth it, if you break down those barriers and you create what they call is that interpersonal closeness with the person sitting across from the table, you have catapulted your relationship way down the road. Because otherwise you would have never talked about like that. You expedited this entire process to get to this point because you took the risk, because it was vulnerable, assuming that it was well received and assuming you could get that physical connection with that individual based off of these questions. You just went light years ahead because of that vulnerability and that risk. But the reward is tremendous if it works.
So why don't we do it more?
It's hard. Right? It's not, the sitting down, talking with these things. If it's not in front of us, we're doing a podcast about it. So we needed to do some research. We needed to spend some time with this. It's not in front of everybody. Hopefully it is now. Again, if we can connect, we can have an impact with some folks, with our listener right now, with them going, well, let me go look into this. And maybe it helps them connect with a partner or a friend or whatever it is. But it takes time, and time is valuable, and it takes risk, and risk is dangerous, right? And it creates vulnerability, not a fun feeling to live in all of the time.
Yeah.
So to open up that gate and then close it again, all those that's hard. However, I think the rewards are there. And I think that's why as people search for love, this may expedite that a little bit. It's probably better than going on The Bachelor. So, is celebrating the completion of their 28th season.
Wow.
Yeah. Where the strong majority of the relationships, the final pairing, the marriage, whatever the hell it is at the end, don't last more than 4 months.
Oh,
however, we are inundated today with this idea of love and passion and all these things. And you got to find love and you got to find love. That's neat. I think what this does is that this creates compassion. And compassion is a part of it, is a part of love in that relationship. But it's not just this, unfortunately, this kind of surface level love piece. It creates this, literally the Latin translation of compassion is to suffer with, right? So I don't think going through these questions creates this suffer, but it does create compassion, and you start to understand with this other person what's happening.
Yeah.
So it's intertwined. It's, are you going to sit down with somebody and ask these 36 questions with a stranger and fall in love? Maybe. Are you going to expedite the process of your relationship? Yes. Yeah. I think that is pretty much guaranteed.
Yeah. It's funny because what catapulted this into popular culture was that concept of falling in love. But really, we need to get past that mindset, right? And get deeper into it. It is about finding ways to connect with somebody. It is about being more compassionate with others. It may not result in the stereotype of love, but like you just said, we are moving that relationship forward.
Agreed. Fascinating subject, Brant. I'm so glad that you brought this to my attention, because it's a tool. It can definitely be used. And even going through a few of these questions with my wife, it's fascinating to talk about this and to see. And again, I was blown away just by that. You ask these questions and you're physically looking at them and listening to what they have to say. It's an emotional path for sure.
Yeah. I think it's fun to think about too, just knowing that the power behind a question and what it can do, right? And not just with your spouse, but with anybody. I've used questions like this before with employees. I've used questions like this before with friends. I've had friends who ask really good questions that get into or get a conversation going that maybe we wouldn't have gotten into before. Finding those opportunities where you're looking for connection, or you want to find a way to connect. I keep saying that word. Find a way to get to know somebody better. Use some questions. If it's going towards using these 36, go for it. If you just want to try using one of them and see what happens, go for it. But you've got to take that risk, right? You've got to open yourself up to that vulnerability to try that in order to get the reward from it.
Yeah, and the other part of that equation is that you can have some of these questions in your pocket and bring them out at a dinner party if you want to. Their effectiveness is as much as you're going to listen to the response. So that listening component, you have to be prepared for that as well. If you're gonna bring this piece up, you can't just ask these questions and walk away. You have to be committed to the listening component of this topic, of these questions.
So I can't just run into the room, ask a question real loud to everybody, and then run away.
Blah blah blah. Oh, what's that? I wasn't listening. I'm sorry, I wasn't listening to your response about.
Hey, everybody! What's your most terrible memory? All right, see you later.
Peace. I'm out of here. So, guys, hey, how's it going? Oh, great to see you again. Hey, I was just wondering, how do you feel about your relationship with your mother? I'm going to go grab another drink. I'll see you guys later. Let's talk about it.
You come back and they're just sobbing in each other's arms.
Oh, what happened? What's going on?
Oh, our mom. We miss our mom.
Sorry, I don't mean to make light of that question because that's a heavy-ass question. But
it's a heavy question.
It drives...
Is it too serious to be joked about, though?
Oh, I see what you did there. I see what you did there. The point is you've got to listen. You've got to be ready to listen to it as well. Which is why we're talking about this, because this is a podcast about listening. So, Brant, what do you take away from this topic, from this article?
I'm going to take away from this that putting in time, putting in effort, putting yourself out there with another person helps lead to that greater connection, the greater compassion, the greater empathy, the greater getting to know someone and understanding someone, which helps break down maybe some of those preconceived ideas or notions about someone, but also helps create a better sense of connection and belonging that maybe wasn't there before. So I'm going to take away making sure that I'm being intentional about asking questions of people and knowing that I full on might just get rejected, but it's worth trying it out.
Out of this conversation today, I get this idea behind 30 years ago, this kind of hit the surface and started to get some traction with what they were trying to do, which was create this sense of interpersonal closeness. To intertwine the word love and to combine it with the word love, to me, it's there. It works. But it's not just love. It's not just this idea of deep affection for someone. Mm-hmm. It's the compassion piece. And I think that word compassion is the word that goes across if it's two people in the laboratory literally asking questions to each other for the first time, if it's built into a classroom, a college classroom, to draw this into a community, to draw the neighborhoods together. It's all about compassion. And it's all about that ability to, in Latin, to suffer with others. You create compassion for the other person. And if this world could have just a little bit more compassion through good questions, through good listening, and being a little bit vulnerable and creating that level of risk, everybody would be better for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that the idea of to suffer with. The other side is suffering without. Like, I'd rather suffer with someone than suffer by myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. These are not just one person asking all of these questions. They're designed that you got to give an answer to.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think that's the idea behind it. So my takeaway is the word compassion out of all of this.
Nice. Do I have to have a one-word answer too?
I'm going to summarize all of this in one
word.
No, you don't. Great topic. So we just talked about the world of compassion and risk and vulnerability, all those things. Next podcast, we're going to transition into the world of listening to children. And we are going to bring in an expert. We're going to learn some different ways that we can have children listen to us and how to maximize that.
Yes. And how do you listen to them?
And how do you listen to kids? If you're looking for more information, you can find it in the description of this podcast. Any of the sources that we used, along with any more of the information about love in a laboratory.
Love in a laboratory? No, just love anywhere.
That was an Aerosmith song. Go on. I'm sorry.
This podcast was created and produced by Drew Richmond and Brant Christofferson, editing by me, and music by Drew.
Me!
That's you. Have a good one, Drew.
Bye, Brant. Till next time.
See you next time.